tarpon, inshore. And when I say tarpon, extremely good at tarpon. When I say inshore, extremely good at inshore. I don't know about kingfish yet. I'm still undetermined. We'll wait and see. So without any further ado, Captain Dave.
Thanks for having me. Dave Dennison, born and raised here in Tampa, Florida. You guys talking about up north and all that. Up north for me is I-4. I-4 is the dividing line between where I will go and where I won't go. So pretty much spent my life fishing Tampa Bay, its waters. I've tarpon fished about everywhere on this side of the world that you can actually catch tarpon, from Costa Rica, Panama, Belize, Puerto Rico, a bunch of South American stuff. I've captained and co-captained 10 different PTTS teams over the last 10 years, finishing in the top 10 all of those 10 years, and the top 5 the last 4 years. Those of you that have seen the PTTS on TV kind of deal, it's kind of a pretty big deal. Big tournament. It's a series tournament, like some of the redfish tournaments used to be in the past, where basically we fish a regular season down to eliminating some of the field down to a top 25 boats out of the field that then go on and fish a championship. We won the championship 2 years ago now. That was close to a $65,000 payday for us. So that was, there's a lot of money in it. There's a lot of prestige and kind of cool stuff associated with it. I'm not going to really talk too much about Boca Grande because it's a totally different fishery than what we do up here. You can't do what we do in Boca Grande up here. Our tarpon don't stack up and stack on top of each other like they do in the past. And pretty much what my plan is, and it's kind of a smaller group tonight, I'll kind of change that to what you guys want. But basically we're going to talk about inshore Tampa Bay tarpon fishing, and we'll talk about kingfishing on the aspect of doing it from kind of the smaller boats and not really some of the really hardcore tournament fishing, trying to catch a 40-pound kingfish kind of deal. I also captain a 38 Jupiter for a client of mine, and a couple of different kingfish tournaments. We do both King of the Beaches. We do some of the SKA events locally. When I started fishing with him, we were full SKA circuit kind of deal for the first 3 years. We were doing everything from Biloxi to Charleston kind of deal. It was 16 tournaments a year. My charter business didn't allow it. My charter business is how I pay my bills, and I couldn't be on the road that much fishing. But there's a lot of neat things with Tampa Bay. We get and I'll start on kingfish if you guys are like that. I've kind of done this last year on tarpon. We'll touch on tarpon again, but we haven't really talked about kingfish, and these guys have brought me in as kind of some of the kingfish stuff. Pretty much Tampa Bay, the way we're shaped, the way we've got the ship channel out there, and some of the hard bottom right off St. Pete Beach and Blinds Pass and Johns Pass and all that kind of stuff, we're really in an area that our kingfish stop and stay kind of deal. We have a spring season and a fall season. Our spring season is literally just starting. We have kingfish here. I personally believe this weekend it's going to go off. Our water temperature's right, our bait's right. Pretty much I think we're right at that threshold that it's about to say it's time to go kingfishing kind of deal. When we're kingfishing, some of the biggest things that, and this is kind of going into what he was talking about on that mackerel tournament. One of the biggest things I see people do is they think you've got to fish the biggest baits in the world on wire stinger rigs and all that kind of stuff. If you're trying to catch a 40-pound kingfish, absolutely, that's how you fish it. These are my snook rods. These are what I do 99% of my inshore fishing with, here in Tampa Bay. They're also my kingfish rods. It's a medium heavy rod, 4,000 series reel. You pick the manufacturer. I'm personally sponsored by Quantum and Fenor, so you'll notice everything I have is Quantum and Fenor. It's a 40,000, like I said, 4,000 series reel, 20-pound braid. And I keep about a minimum of 150 yards on it, especially during kingfish season. A kingfish will take 150 yards of line without slowing down, kind of deal. They're a cool fish to catch. Everything that you do for inshore fishing is the same exact doing it for offshore fishing. You're catching bait at the same spot, the same white bait, same thread fin, same, all that. That's how we're fishing. My particular way that I do 90% of my kingfishing, if you look at my leaders, That's one of the things that I do. My leaders are about 3 to 4 feet long. I run long leaders, especially with the yellow high-vis lines. You've really got to increase the length of that leader. They don't see this green, especially here inside our side of the bay, no matter what time of year. Water's crystal clear right now, but it's still tannicky kind of deal. You know, we don't have that really, really gin clear water like you do in the Keys and all that kind of stuff. So the green really camos it. You get that yellow on there, and you know, your customers like it. Ray's one of my regular guys that fishes with me quite a bit. He likes the yellow line when I have him on the reels.
Some of the stuff I can see.
Yeah, but it does. The fish do see it, and you've got to run really long leaders to prevent them from kind of getting, you know, shying off of it. Off of that leader, if you look, those are basically number 1 long shank, 2 extra strong eagle claw hooks. What I do is I take 2 of them together. You basically put one over the other like so that it kind of forms a little T like that. Take your pair of pliers, smash them down, and it'll smash that barb down just enough to where you'll put 2 of them together. Your bait goes on the bottom of it, and the second one is almost acting like a stinger rig kind of deal, and slash a leader. So it's giving you a little bit, it's giving you, you know, almost 4 inches of line there, but you're still using mono leader. You're going to get cut off. I mean, there's like what he's talking about, mackerel fishing kind of deal. I mean, I buy these hooks by the case. There's 50 in a pack, and I use about 1 a day, you know, kind of deal. Right now, we've got mackerel on every trout flat that we're fishing, so I'm using long shake hooks trout fishing right now because we've got 30-inch mackerel on 5 foot of grass in Tampa Bay right now. So I get tired of going through circle hooks and what I pay for circle hooks and the amount of hooks I use. I go to long shank. Snook won't touch them, but a trout doesn't care, kind of deal. They'll eat it off of a long shank J hook. You'll catch trout, you'll catch mackerel, but I also catch my kingfish with it. And that's how I sit with my customers. You got to remember, as a charter captain, I'm not tournament fishing. It's a totally different mindset when you're tournament fishing because I want one fish that's going to put me in the money, and that's all I care about. When I get the guy from Indiana that's here because it's snowing where he's from and he wants to go out and catch fish, I want to catch as many mackerel, as many kingfish, and all that as I can. When I'm talking about doing this kind of stuff, we're talking up kingfish up into the 25, you know, pound class kind of deal. You start pushing 25 pounds, you either better be on a buoy ball kind of deal, which we're going to get into, or you better go up to the next size reels. You better go to like your actual tarpon spinning reels, or a conventional reel. Everybody's like, where to go? Kingfishing's, I'll give you numbers. I mean, it's not like grouper fishing. We're not secretive of our kingfish stuff. You're fishing hard bottom area kind of deal. That's where the kingfish like. You gotta remember, a kingfish is like a tuna. You never stop swimming. It's not like a grouper where, hey, I like this ledge, this little acre of land in the ocean kind of deal is my home kind of deal. A kingfish that you catch off clear water is like a tarpon. He could be in Tampa Bay tomorrow. He can be in Sarasota the day after that. He'll probably be in Boca Grande by the end of the week kind of deal. You know, we're not fishing. It's not like snook fishing a point where I can pretty much name the snook that are up there. When I come into a spot, I'm like, oh, there's Fred, there's Tom, and Stacy's over there today too. She's a big girl. We want to hook her kind of deal. Kingfish aren't like that. They're constantly moving. You're not going to catch the same fish, you know, in the same spot every day, but those spots will play out year after year after year. Kingfish spots are easy to find because if you get out there and you get off the beach, you go out, you name the pass kind of deal, and you go out 2 or 3 miles off the beach, start looking for the crab pots. Because our stone crab traps, that's one of the biggest things that people don't realize. You got to remember, those stone crab guys are dropping them on ledges. That's why if you go off and you're a mile off the beach, 5 miles off the beach, you really don't see them past like 7 or 8 miles out. Those are on a bottom break kind of deal. It's just like a flat here. You just got the cockroach flat, a 6-foot line, it drops off kind of deal and goes from grass to now we're in 10, 12 feet of water. Those crab trap lines, you can get behind them and you can almost pick a compass heading on them. There's a ledge there kind of deal. Or there's hard bottom or a contour line or something. That's why if you look at those guys, they're running in a straight line. Because the stone crabs hide in those ledges, and that's why the kingfish are sitting in that area, because there's bait there, there's fish there, there's all kinds of stuff there. You're not going to catch kingfish over sand kind of deal. If you're over sand, you're wasting your time. It's like anything else in offshore fishing, for those of you that have been to the Keys or you do anything like that. You got birds in the area, birds are diving, there's bait there, fish is lively. If I come into a kingfish spot, I'm on my electronics, I'm looking down, I see that there's bait below me, buddy, the bottom's alive. There's stuff here, kind of thing. Kingfishing, it's easy on the aspect of you get into an area, you don't hook a fish in 5 minutes, move. But I can pretty much tell you majority of my fishing is done blind pass drop kind of deal. There's a hard bottom area that's basically due west of Pass-A-Grille that we call the parking lot. It's kind of the guides mecca. I sit there every day during kingfish season kind of deal. It's in 30 feet of water, and it's 5.4 miles on a 295 heading kind of deal out of Pass-A-Grille. I mean, if you came out of Pass-A-Grille and you punched in, if you put in the tanks of St. Pete Beach Reef kind of deal, you'd run right over the top of it kind of thing. It's one of those, I can literally see all the other jamokes that are on the St. Pete Beach Reef because everybody floods to the artificial reefs. Dude, those reefs, it's like Bahia Beach here. I run by those guys snook fishing every day kind of deal, and there's 40 boats, and they're 15-foot lund because all the tourists are down kind of deal, so pardon me, but the muskie and the walleye guys and everybody else, they go out there and sit. Those reefs get hit so hard kind of deal. They're constantly, there's constantly got people on them, and a lot of times the fish move off of them. Kind of find your own areas. The ship channel is phenomenal. Anything on the edges of the ship channel, everybody around here kind of knows 2 and 3, or 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 kind of deal are pretty much some of our biggest kingfish areas. And what we mean by that is we're talking channel markers kind of deal. When you're going out the ship channel at Tampa Bay, obviously as you go out the channel, the numbers go down until you get to the Whistler buoy and the channel doesn't exist anymore kind of deal. But when you get out there and you're anywhere between 6-7 miles out off of Egmont when you're in that, but there's 90% of the big fish that are caught in King of the Beach kind of deal, and you're getting into that 30-pound class and all that, those fish are caught in between 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 kind of deal. And basically what you're doing is you're either sitting on the edge or you're trolling the edge, kind of deal, the ship channel. Those fish, and it's like this with anything in fishing kind of deal. Our grouper do it, our mangrove snapper do it, in the wintertime our sheep's head do it. They sit on those channel edges. If you think about what a ledge is offshore kind of deal, a natural crack in the bottom. I used to commercial spearfish kind of deal, so I have no clue how many hours under St. Pete Beach underwater I have kind of deal. But if you look at a ledge and how a ledge is shaped, it's basically just an erosion of bottom and it's a crack. We have a contour change. We might say, 55 feet and it goes to 60 feet kind of deal. We're talking 5 foot kind of deal. Well, imagine ship channel, where now we're at 18 feet and we go to 40 feet. And that was man-made. That was rock, that was limestone that back in the 40s and 50s that they dredged out, they blew up, all the other ways, unfortunately, that we've dug ship channels, in big areas, but that's how they did it. Now, all these years later, those are giant ledges. We have them in Tampa Bay. It goes from downtown Tampa all the way through the Skyway and everywhere else kind of deal. Our Spanish mackerel come in here and get on them really, really good. You can sit, everybody, Tampa Spanish mackerel fishing is not secret stuff kind of deal. You're out there and you're looking for the birds and you're kind of sitting on the edge of the ship channel where the markers. The biggest thing with fishing, and I tell people this, it's bait. Either you've got to have it, you've got to find it, you've got to know where it's at, because even if I have it, but I've got to go somewhere else and I've got to take it to another area where it's there anyways. Because just because I have it and it's in my live well, if I'm going to an area that there's no bait there, there's no fish there kind of deal. Fish follow bait. That's how I want to kind of start this. I want to go into catching bait, because kingfishing and tarpon fishing basically kind of go the same as far as how you start the day, how you fish it, and what you do, with buoy balls and everything else as a part of it kind of thing. Pretty much the bait in the last 2 weeks is flooded inside Tampa Bay. All the stuff, we've been running to the bridge since mid-February, catching bait kind of deal. I still personally go to the bridge every day because I can go to the bridge and I can do in 3 throws what I can do in 40 throws on the grass flats kind of deal. By the time it takes me to catch bait on the grass flat, I could have already been to the bridge and back. Little Harbor is pretty much my home base. I pick up 90% of my yearly charters here, and that's what we do. So the bridge from here is 14 miles, kind of deal, from here to the Skyway, catch bait. It's a little bit of a haul, but it's not that bad when you think about it. I can go there and I can chum it for 2 seconds kind of deal, and I can catch 100 pieces a throw, and black out my well in 20 minutes. So we'll kind of start with that. We're going to go to the bridge, catch bait, or we're going to go to any of the markers. And right now I do mean any of the markers. The bait just moved in to the markers here this week. This morning, one of the first signs I've kind of seen of the thread fins actually showering kind of deal, where they're in big pods and they're all the way in here to Apollo Beach. I mean, they were outside a little harbor this morning at first light by the acre loads kind of deal. So that tells you everything's right in line right now. The bait's moved into the bay. We have plenty of bait, and that's what you're using. White bait, scaled sardines, pretty much the two most baits I use for kingfishing, mackerel fishing, anything else, snook fishing, it doesn't matter. I go catch the same bait to go do whatever I want to do with it kind of deal. The only thing is when you're kingfishing, I prefer a little bit bigger bait than I do if I'm snook and trout and red fishing and all that. You know, we like those, and I actually kept some today, and I didn't want to deal with stinky baits, but I actually kept a couple of baits today to show you guys different sizes kind of deal of what we have in Tampa Bay. But you know, our pilchard or scaled sardine, greenback, whatever you want to call them, white bait, we all call them the same thing, is that, you know, typical 2.5, 3-inch long, you know, inshore bait kind of deal. It's cool, kingfish will eat it, but they'll love a bigger bait, you know, what we call pork chop baits kind of deal. Those big white baits that are literally the size of your hand kind of thing. They, the kingfish, you can't put too big of a bait on a kingfish. He'll eat anything you put out there from. And we, tournament fish, we fish full-size ladyfish. I mean, the ladyfish that we're catching kind of deal, you know, mullet, other smaller Spanish mackerel, I mean, they'll truly eat whatever you put out there size-wise. But those larger threadfin herring and the larger white baits are kind of the preferred kingfish baits, which is also the preferred tarpon bait. It's kind of the same thing. That's why I said we'll start with those, just because those are the easiest to catch. They're the most plentiful. And if I have a customer that, like, before I get down to Boca Grande, majority of my stuff's all inshore stuff, and we might dabble in tarpon fishing for an hour or two at the bridge when we're done catching bait. But if I have a guy call me and say, hey, I want to do nothing but tarpon fish today, I'm not going to go catch those little guys, because I don't want to sit there and be throwing a 2.5, 3-inch long bait. I'm going to go to the markers and I'm going to get thread fins. Or I'm going to get bigger white bait. I'm going to get those bigger baits that I can throw, you know, on the pilings of the Skyway and some of that stuff, and specifically catch tarpon. Our kingfish are the same thing. The bigger baits, the way to go. And you can't have enough bait. It's one of those things where we say blacked out in the live well. What we mean by that kind of deal, and some of you, I do have some customers in here that fish with me all the time, and they know I'm a bait whore. I mean, it just is what it is. I mean, I'm going to go out and I'm going to black out my well. And what I mean by that is when I'm looking over the top of my well, I can't see the bottom of it kind of thing. I mean, when I look down on it, it's just white bait. It's just bait in there. And I have a 60-gallon well. I fish a 24-foot Chafe tower boat as my primary charter boat. I have an 18-foot Maverick Master Angler that I also use for some fly fishing customers and some more sight fishing, stealthy, tactical kind of stuff. But I get as much bait as I can, because when I get there, if I know the fish are there, even if they're not wanting to eat, and I put enough bait, and this applies to everything, snook fishing, trout fishing, red fishing. Sometimes redfish will shut down if you overchum them, but kingfishing, you know, specifically too, kind of deal. The more chum I put out there with either my bat or I cut it up or I do whatever, they're going to eat. I'm going to make them eat. You know, that's like some of the snook that I have. You know, some of our spots right now, there's passes that have 50 snooks sitting in them right now. They might not want to eat, and I might have the tide a little wrong. I might be an hour off when I know they're going to eat. But I get in there and I pull my wiffle ball bat out and I get a couple scoops out there and I chum them kind of deal. I'm going to make them eat. The bite might last for 20 minutes kind of deal. And we might catch 50 rail time. I mean, we might pull into a spot and catch 20 snook in 30 minutes kind of deal. And then I shut it down because I overfed them, but I don't care. I went into that spot. I did that. I did what I had to do for my customer, and now we'll go on to the next spot and do it again. Kingfishing's kind of the same thing. When you've got your bait, now we're going to where the fish are. And like I said, if you're leaving this area, or a lot of people, if you're going to target kingfish, for those people that think long runs are still crazy, I drive a boat like I drive a car. I would rather go across the bay than drive to Fort DeSoto and launch there and all that. From here, I use Simmons Park every morning kind of deal. I can be at Fort DeSoto in 15 minutes. If I pass the front gate of Simmons Park on 41 and drive 41 to over the Skyway, get to O'Neill's and get to the Skyway and all that, it's 45 minutes to an hour kind of deal from the time I pass Simmons Park. I can drop my boat in the water and be in O'Neill's or be at Maximo or be wherever in 15 to 20 minutes. And at the end of the day, I'd much rather ride home on the boat than sit in freaking 275 traffic pulling a 24-foot Chafe behind me kind of deal. So for me, this is my home base. I go wherever I need to go from here. St. Pete Beach, and a lot of guys, I'm going to talk inshore kind of deal. You know, you're not going to catch, not saying that you won't, but you're not going to typically catch a 40-pound kingfish 500 yards off St. Pete Beach, but you're going to catch 25 kind of deal. You're going to catch 25 kingfish in one day. That the average of them is 12 to 15 pounds. And for a charter customer, that's what he wants. Because I can tell you right now, if you're doing anything to eat, you don't want one over 15 pounds. Kind of deal. You get those big kingfish, and the only thing they're about good for is fertilizer, because they get really strong unless you're smoking them and making fish spread out of them and all that. You know, you want the smaller cans, just like anything else. I mean, most of the redfish that I keep are 18 to 22, 23 inches kind of deal. You know, let the bigger guys go. Same thing with trout. You get a good fillet off of 16 to, say, 18, 19-inch trout. I personally don't keep a trout over 20 inches on my boat. It's one of my personal rules kind of deal that I do. It's just those fish are our spawning fish. There's not that much meat that you get off of it, and what they let you keep 1 over 21, I'd rather keep 4, 18, you know, kind of deal. So, you know, that's how I'm doing it. A lot of things that I'm doing are conservation-wise, but you get out there, you get into some hard bottom area, and I mean, like I said, the ship channel, St. Pete Beach, the trade winds. And like I said, I'll give you guys GPS numbers, but I mean, it's one of those, the trade winds, if you're in 30 feet of water and you see the big blue slide that's like 4 stories tall kind of deal that all the kids buy the little wristbands for and they go down the slide, I'm sitting in 30 feet of water, I put the slide right off to my right-hand side, and I'm sitting a half a mile off the beach kind of deal. And you're going to also know you're in the right area because you're going to see the crab traps. If you don't see the crab traps kind of deal, you're in the wrong area because you're not on that bottom. That's kingfishing. That's it. Everybody thinks it's this crazy stuff, and they want to go, we got to troll, and we got to pull spoons, and we got to. You don't need to do any of that kind of deal. You're sitting there, you're fishing baits like this. You're going to catch 500 mackerel kind of thing, which preferably if you're going to do anything to eat, I would rather catch the mackerel than the kingfish any day. I think they taste better. And some of the mackerel out there are monsters. If I was fishing you guys' tournament, that's where I would be sitting. I'd be sitting off of St. Pete Beach kind of deal, and most of the mackerel that I'm going to catch as a byproduct of kingfishing are going to be 30 inches. You know, I mean, we've got some, you know, further south of the bay, outside of Joe's and off the drop-off of Joe's and Bishop's right now. There's as big as mackerel and as many of them as you want out there, you know, right now to be had. But like I said, I'm taking that bottom hook, I'm putting the bait through the nose, just like I'm snook fishing and any other style of fishing, I'm just free lining them. Just let them sit out there and do its thing. When you grab a hold of a kingfish or you grab a hold of a mackerel, you know it kind of deal. You know, I always tell some of my customers the best fishing in the boat's Rodney the rod holder, because he doesn't do anything kind of deal. You know, especially with these J hooks kind of deal. A kingfish, he hits it at such a run, and they're coming up and slashing baits, and mackerel feed the same way, he's going to hook himself. You don't need to do this bill dance, crazy hook set stuff. And most of my customers, I teach them not to do that anyways, because anything other than kingfishing that I'm ever doing, I'm on a circle hook. So if you're yanking hooks and you're jerking rods and everything else, you're never going to catch a fish with me anyways, because all my fish is done on circle hooks. So I don't tell my customers, hey, by the way, you've got a J hook on. I just tell them to do your normal thing. Just stay tight. Just keep the slack out of the line and stay tight. Kind of one of the things that I'm going to tell you, and this is just as a guide kind of deal, ways of managing your boat. When you start getting into multiple hook rigs, anytime I've been guiding for almost 20 years kind of thing. I fish about 200 days a year. Majority of the people that I have hooked on trips over the course of my entire career has been kingfishing, especially when you start getting into stinger rigs kind of deal, because you've got that other trouble hook out there flying around on a piece of wire, and guys grab the bait in the wrong spot and all that kind of crazy stuff. My reels, and this is just a pet peeve outside of really our discussion, my line never gets reeled in higher than what it is right now. I love customers that bring me fish and it's like this kind of deal. And now I'm over the side of the boat and I've got a D-hooker, and I'm trying, and meanwhile he's hitting me in the head with the top of the rod because he's beating, he's holding the rod and the fish is moving around, and I'm trying to get him off so we can get another one or whatever the case may be. When you guys reel stuff in, reel them out like that. If you ever watch me walk up to a live well, my customers or whatever kind of thing, this is how I hold my stuff. I go in, I dip my hand right now, I get a bait out, I put it on, I drop it, all right, let's go, let's get you back out there kind of deal. For one, these setups are $500 a pop, kind of deal. I love when my customers, the guy's like, he's doing this on my boat kind of thing, dragging the reel around. You're like, buddy, really? Can you keep my reel off the floor, please? Just a little bit of a pet peeve, like I said, but it also helps you, for one, stay efficient. I watch guys all the time, and I watch customers. They'll pull into spots with me, and they want to know why we're catching more fish than them. The things that guides do and that professional tournament fishermen do that's different than anybody else kind of deal is it's the little tiny things. It's the fluorocarbon leaders. It's the right size hook versus these big monster hooks. Everybody, and we're going to get into that here in a minute talking tarpon fishing. Everybody thinks you're using these 150-pound leaders and these 9-aught hooks kind of deal, and you're like, dude, it's just a tarpon. The guys on the ocean kind of deal that are out there catching 4,000-pound great white sharks aren't using the gear that you're trying to catch kingfish with. But basically, keep your things to where I've always got the hook in my hand. So instead of that hook dangling around and flying around, and then I watch the guy and he gets a bait in the live well and he comes up here and his line's up here and he's trying to bait, and then he comes into here and now, okay, I got to try to cast my rod. That's why half the time with my customers, if those of you that have fished with me kind of deal, I've got another rod typically already with a bait on it because I know the fish are going to eat as soon as I get there kind of deal. As soon as you lose a bait or miss a fish or do whatever, I come up right behind you, I flip it out, I hand you the rod and say, here you go, kind of deal. And the guy's like, oh, cool, thanks. And then he hands me that rod, and because I'm so much faster, I'm so much more efficient. I know how many steps backwards it is to get to my live well. I might not know where my rod rack is here. Now, on my boat, I know where my live well's at. I can get to my live well before you go over there and thread another bait and everything else. I'm going to pass these hooks around. Don't tell anybody, but you can buy them at Walmart. It's actually one of the things Walmart sells that's actually worth a darn fishing-wise. And it's this exact hook kind of deal. If you can't go and find them, because usually I go to different Walmarts and whatever they have on the peg, I actually take the entire peg. So sometimes you'll go in behind me, especially this time of year, and because I'm sitting on about 100 of these at my house right now because I use one a day kind of deal, and sometimes 2 a day. But these are what you want to use mackerel fishing, king fishing here in Tampa Bay. It's a number 1 hook. Why I buy the number 1 versus the 1-aught is in the number 1, the box comes in 50. You go to 1-aught, it doesn't give you that much bigger of a hook, and you get 40. So it's a cost matter for me. I get 10 more hooks for the same price. But basically, every Walmart in this local area for some reason sells those. Tampa Fishing Outfitters, who I'm a very big fan of, I do a lot of stuff for them. They don't even have that exact box. And I've tried to have them get that in. That box right there, 50 hooks from Walmart's like $5.67. I mean, you can't beat the price of it. It's like I said, I truly buy them by the peg. I mean, whatever they've got there, I buy them. And I start doing that usually a month before kingfish season, and I kind of start, keeping a good supply of them. Fluorocarbon leader is the only leader I use on my boat. A lot of people that are like, why fluorocarbon? Why fluorocarbon? I don't know why. It just shit works, kind of deal. If you think about what we spend on our boats, kind of deal, what we spend in gas. Some of you guys that get to fish once on the weekend, kind of deal. You're talking pennies on the leader compared to using a mono versus fluorocarbon. There's a lot of fluorocarbon spools out there. I go through so much of it. Most of the ones I buy are the 200-yard spools, so they're pretty big, pretty pricey. But I use them for everything. I use a 30-pound fluorocarbon. You name the manufacturer, because I'm not even loyal to a manufacturer. I have a new sponsor for line right now that we're kind of just getting some of our initial orders, but they're all really good. The Hero stuff that Tampa Fishing Outfitter sells, it's probably one of the better ones for the price. Their 200-yard spools are like $40 kind of deal. Honestly, for you guys, that's going to last you guys, 2 years kind of thing. And you can use 1 leader for everything. I mean, majority of, and I'm going to bounce around a lot tonight because there's a lot going on in here. But pretty much the leaders that are on my boat for everything that we do kind of deal, 20, 30, 50, and 80 kind of deal. Are pretty much all the leaders that you need. 90% of what I do is on 20 and 30. And I'll break that down into, if I'm on open grass flats, I'm trout fishing. Say I'm red fishing Tarpon Key, I'm red fishing some of that kind of stuff, and I'm not playing in mangroves, I'm not playing on oyster bars, I'm not playing in stuff that I can be structure oriented. If If I can get away with 20, I'm going to. You start getting dicey when you start playing with 20 and you start playing with big snook, even in open water, because they'll chafe through it. A redfish has nothing he's going to chafe through. He's got rubbery lips kind of deal. Ray will tell you, we were on some redfish about 2 or 3 weeks ago that the average fish was, 30 inches. I mean, the average fish was 30. We didn't catch one that day that was slot. We were trying to find one for dinner, and we literally went through 30 redfish, and we did not find one that was slot. If I can go with 20 on those, you'll get bit more. It's the same thing with anything else. If you're going, a lot of guys will tell you, oh, if you're using mono for Spanish mackerel, you can use mono, but you need to use 50 pound. I'll outfish you all day long in 30. You keep using your 50 kind of deal, because I'm going to get bit more in 30, with 30. And that's some of the things that's different between me and some of the other guys. They're like, oh, I got bit off. I'm like, I don't care. Cool, there's fish here. That's the way I look at a bite off. If I'm out kingfishing or if I'm mackerel fishing and I get bit off, that's cool. I'll just keep re-rigging and I'll keep retying and I'm going to catch 40 fish. And at the end of the day, we've got 15 in the bag kind of thing. And yeah, we might have lost a couple at the boat, but it beat the heck out of the guy that caught 4 fish kind of deal, because he's over tackling them. He's overusing the stuff that he needs to do. Tarpon fishing is the same way. We'll get into that in a little while. Same thing. I mean, I only use 80 in Boca, and the way we fish down there, it's because we're down playing in the bottom, and these fish are really tight to the bottom, and it's a wild, wild west down there when it comes to structure kind of deal. And sometimes you need that little extra weight, and those fish down there are a lot bigger. Our average fish in Tampa Bay here is 125, 130. Our average fish in Boca's 160-ish kind of deal, 150, 160. We won't personally weigh a fish as a team that's less than 150, because it's not going to have us in the top 5. It's not going to keep us in the money. That fish for us is more valuable as a release. And let's get the release. Let's go get it. Now let's either keep going for releases or find the fish that we need to weigh. But 60 pound is what I do majority of my tarpon fishing here in Tampa Bay with. But 30, like I said, 30 fishes 80% of what I do a year. I literally go through a 200 yard spool in, anywhere between 2 weeks and 3 weeks kind of deal, just depending on if I'm fishing mackerel a lot or whatever. When I pull them off, that's about my average leader. A lot of guys make these leaders that are like this big. I don't know why kind of deal. I don't care how long my leader is. I mean, you can make me a 10-foot leader kind of deal. And as long as that knot will go through the end of the rod tip kind of deal, you can reel the leader onto the main rod tip for all I care. I mean, it's not going to do anything. Snook fishing, especially right now when we're doing 25, 30 snook days on average this time of year, the longer I make it, the more times I can trim that chafe off kind of deal. Ray will tell you, Ralph will tell you, some of these guys that are customers of mine that fish with me on a monthly basis kind of thing, I'll tell you, if we... we're catching snook pretty much as I handed you another rod. I'm snipping that chafe off, and I'm typically going to lose 2 or 3 inches of that leader every time. Retie the hook, get it back on there. Because when I start getting lazy on that is when we lose, big fish kind of deal. Ralph made it a trip for me about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we hooked a snook that I'll flat out tell you, and I've seen a bunch of them in my day, was well over 43, 44 inches kind of deal. I mean, he was a 35, 40 pound snook kind of deal. We actually survived 2 little runs in the mangroves, pulled him out backwards, sideways kind of deal, got the fish out of the bushes, and the fish came loose 5 feet from the boat kind of deal. I mean, truly a once in a lifetime fish for a customer. Probably one of the top 5 snook that I've seen as a professional guide fishing 200 days. I mean, he was truly a 43, 44 inch fish that was that wide across the back kind of deal. And it chafed through. We don't know if was that a leader that we got slack on, because it was one of those, we were literally catching snook after snook after snook after snook after snook. And sometimes when you get that good of a bite going, you do start getting slack, and you're like, that one's good, one more cast. Catch one more fish, and then I'll cut the chafe off and we'll redo it. I don't think that happened, because I think as we were changing out rods, it was actually a fresh leader. But long story short, the guy lost probably a fish that he'll never catch again in his life kind of deal because of a chafe. It happens. It's kind of part of it. I'll pass this around. When it comes to leader, when it comes to braid, when it comes to any of that kind of stuff, the cutters that are on the market nowadays suck. Kind of deal. I have a pair of Van Staal pliers, the most high-end pliers that you can buy. The pair of pliers I have are $400. kind of deal. I wouldn't have personally bought them. I actually got them as a gift from a client that I used to do a bunch of corporate work with, and he gave them to me for Christmas, and it's the only reason I have a $400 pair of pliers. But even when the cutters are brand new on them, they don't cut braid worth crap kind of deal. You know, I mean, they do, but they still fray it and everything else. If you want to talk about how to cut stuff, when back to school season happens at Walmart, I'm the guy that goes in there and I buy Friskers by the case. Because they go down to like $1.65 when they do all their little notepads for 10 cents, all their little things. I buy the little Friskers, the child safety Friskers kind of thing, for like $1.65 a piece. You go into like all the tackle stores and they're trying to sell you all these, oh, this cuts braid and this, you know, whatever manufacturer, you know, this is a cool, that's cool. But in 2 weeks they all rust no matter what. They rust, they get, you know, dull, whatever. I take those Friskers, I throw them in the way. I pull out another box kind of deal, and I open those, and I use those for the next week, and I throw them away. When a Frisker's brand new out of the pack, and for about 2 weeks, in my side 2 weeks, you guys probably 2 months, they cut braid 100% clean, no fray, no nothing. Same thing with mono. They'll cut mono all the way up to like 80 pounds. It's the only thing I use to cut stuff in my boat. I keep a pair of them in my pocket. And even when you're paying full price for them this time of year, they're like $2.80 or something. They're like $3 a pair, you know, kind of deal. You can keep 10 of them in your boat for the cost of some of these high-end, you know, scissors that they sell at the fishing stores that are all gimmicky stuff. That's the way to cut your braid and your line and all that kind of thing. Getting into kingfishing kind of deal, when you start wanting to play with wire. Everybody's pretty much familiar with stinger rigs. Basically, a stinger rig is going to have a piece of wire connected to a swivel. Most of us use, and even into the high-end tournament stuff, we use the Supro swivels. They're a really high-end swivel, but they're really not that expensive. You can buy a pack of them. They're like maybe $15, $16 for a pack of 50 kind of deal. And they are microscopic kind of deal. You got to remember, mine is stuff that we're trying to do. We're trying to hide things from fish. So if you ever see, and you'll see some in my rig bag that I already have made, but it's a 50-pound Supro swivel to usually about a 24-inch piece of wire, goes to a nose hook. Nose hook starts depending on what size bait you're using. If I'm using small white baits, I'm pretty much typically not going to be using a stringer if I'm doing that. But say I'm using a thread fin, or I'm using, you know, something in that bigger white bait size, that big kind of deal, you know, you can get away with a 1/0, 2/0 kind of deal, and all the way up into like 5/0. You start hooking mullet kind of deal and big ladyfish and all that kind of thing, you're going to like a 5/0 because you just need to be able to get that gap big enough to get through a mullet's front nose or a blue runner. Some of the bigger baits around here that, you know, like when we kingfish tournament stuff, we're going out with blue runners. You know, blue runners they look like a little Jack Crevalle. You know, for most people who haven't seen a blue runner, they're all silver. Depending on how bait situation is here, right before an SKA event, they go from anywhere, I've seen them go as high as $12 a piece, you know, kind of deal for a blue runner. You know, if you've ever been down to like Miami, Fort Lauderdale area during sailfish season, they're goggle eyes. They go for $10 to $15 a piece during sailfish season. Most of those captains don't leave the, you know, pass without 5 or 6 dozen. You know, we just dropped $600 in bait. By getting it that way. Blue runners is the same thing. If we're kingfishing a tournament, we're typically going to go catch bait the day before. We keep it in the big pens. The boat that I run sits right inside. If anybody knows where the wharf is, there in Paso Grill, it sits in one of those canals in the wharf. We have a huge pen that's probably the size of that table, and it's probably 4 or 5 feet tall, and it's got big floats on it, and we keep our bait in there. We actually feed them, and we'll keep baits for kingfish season that way. That's when we start getting into the stinger rigs. You know, that's when you're starting to use stinger rigs, and you start going to the actual. This is one of my tournament rods. I'll pass this around. You know, that's when we start going into some of the heavier gear. My kingfish rods just so happen to be my same rods that we fish in Boca Grande. These are our same rods that we jig fish with. This is kind of a good example. This is literally stuff that came out of my rod rack today. I didn't go home and rig anything for the seminar. This is exactly how I fish stuff. I like the braided line or the mono line solars when we're trolling for kingfish. You see how tacky those hooks are. When you start messing with kingfish hooks, they're really, really sharp and they'll stick in anything. So just be careful with them. But basically, this is 20-pound mono. It's 20-pound main line, and there's like 300 yards on it. We're talking big kingfish here. We're talking 25-pound class and above, fish kind of deal. On when we're actually slow trolling and we're going to troll baits kind of deal. From that, I go to a white fluorocarbon leader. You see, I'm trying to get rid of that solar, and you can look how long that leader is. It's like a 10-foot leader. Because when we're trolling and everything else, I'm trying to camo out that line and make them not be able to see that line. If you see stinger rigs, we'll truly get into everything. But that's it's about a 10-foot wind-on leader. That leader, like I said, we were talking about earlier, go right through my guides, right onto the reel, and keep fishing kind of deal. It goes to one of those little swivels. That's literally the size of the swivel. It's a 50-pound Supro swivel. I tie all of my rigs myself. I don't buy any of those Kingfish pre-rigs kind of deal that you see at Walmart or you see at any of the tackle stores. Most of the components that they make those with suck. The hooks that are in them are horrible. The wire, I don't really know. You get some of that stuff that's made in Japan and all that. If I didn't put it together myself, I'm not going to fish it. You're using a haywire twist, which is kind of one of the more difficult knots for some people to start learning how to tie. But there's so much stuff on the online nowadays that I'm not going to really get into how to tie knots. But I'll pass this around. This is actually a white bait. I can tell just that this one's been fished because there's a little bit of surface rust on the hook, so I can tell I've actually fished this one. But if you look, that's like a 1/0 hook, and it's got a very small stinger. If you think about the size of the stinger, it needs to match the size of the bait. And why we're using a stinger is that as those kingfish come up, they're going to come up and slash stuff. And like most fish do in the world, if you ever watch sharks feed and watch stuff like that, you take away the rudder from something and it can't swim anymore. So half the time when they come up and strike stuff, they strike its tail. They're going to come up in what we call short striking it kind of deal, but they're just trying to slow it down. You got to remember a full-size ladyfish. You guys catch him, you know how hard they fight kind of deal. He's hauling ass. I mean, he's trying to get away from that fish, and he wants to take his tail off to do it. This guy's pretty short. Like I said, it's for a white bait, so if you can kind of look at it, that stinger would be almost right at the back of the bait, right where his hook, right where his tail and his body kind of meet kind of deal. So that's how long that would be. If you look at some of our other stingers, I might have stingers that are 7-8 inches long if I'm fishing a 2.5-pound, blue runner. And then obviously this front hook would go up in size along with the back treble hook kind of thing. But this is pretty much a trolling rig, kingfish rig, that you can do and slow troll those. You're unsure about bottom kind of deal, and you can even do it with those snook rods and long shank hooks. But if you're unsure of something, set 2 rods out behind the back of the boat and set them back there 100 yards and slow troll that area. Just go look around. You got your electronics on, you're looking, okay, what kind of is live? And as you're coming into a spot and you're kind of doing S-turns and big figure eights around it, you're learning the bottom, you're kind of seeing where the contours are and all that. Most of the time you're going to get knocked down before, all right, cool, there's fish here, let's put the anchor out and let's fish it. I personally would rather anchor than sit on the hook any day. That's one of the things I hate about tarpon fishing the Skyway. I hate sitting on an anchor. I get bored. Kind of deal. Even when I know the fish are there and they're rolling right behind me, it's like I want to go chase them. I want to go do something kind of deal, In Boca, we're constantly chasing them. We're getting over the top of them, and we're staying on fish the whole time. So we're truly just waiting on when the fish actually decide to eat. Here, you're waiting on, you're in the right area, you've got your baits free lined out behind the boat, and now we got to wait on the fish to cooperate and wait for them. It's the other part of fishing. Everybody thinks, oh, fish just feed. Fish don't feed. They're like you and I. I mean, they got breakfast time, dinner time, lunch time. You can miss those times by 20 minutes, and it might be 2 hours again before they decide to eat. Experience will tell you we run the tide kind of deal. I start my day every day pretty much Joe's Island, and I work my way back to Simmons Park, Little Harbor by the end of the day. I know when those fish, as that tide's changing, are going to bite. And that's just because I fished this side of the bay my entire life, ever since I was a little kid. So, you learn that over the years. You kind of learn to be able to read tides and be able to say, dude, 2 o'clock, it's going to go off today. Half the time I look at some of the weekend warrior guys that they're leaving the boat ramp, and I'm picking up my afternoon trip, and these guys are like, oh, it was horrible. I really try not to discuss what I do with my customers in the morning, because when you go back in there and you tell a guy, we caught 35 snook, and we caught about 6 redfish, and about, 20 or 30 trout, kind of deal. The guy looks at me, he's like, for one, you're full of shit. For two, you're lying. I'm like, okay, well, Cool. Have a good day, buddy. enjoy yourself. You know, and I watch people sometimes and they're fishing the wrong tides, they're fishing the wrong areas. You know, where he's sitting, he might be sitting in a spot that he saw me, you know, 2 days ago, and he's sitting right on top of my fish kind of deal. That's cool, but those fish aren't going to eat till about 3:30 today. You're sitting there at 10 o'clock in the morning kind of deal, you know, and that's fishing. That's where the experience, that's where the getting out here, you know, a lot does it, all that. Same thing on the kingfish side. Kingfish run. You're not going to slow them down. It's not a matter of trying to slow them down. We run really light drags. You know, we run like 5-6 pounds of drag, which that one's really heavy for some reason. Basically, when a kingfish hits, you're just letting him run. He'll tell you when you'll be able to get line back on him. I watch guys, you know, customers that pick up a rod and they're just going to town kind of deal. And you're like, buddy, if that drag's going out and he's screaming line kind of deal, let him go. Unless you're snook fishing and it's between me and that wall kind of deal, turning that fish, well, yeah, I've got to do something, or else you sit there and watch him go right into the bushes and end the day for you. But for a fish that he doesn't have structure, he doesn't have anything going on, just let him go. You got 300 yards of line on the boat, you know, kind of deal to let him deal with. If he goes outside of that, that's what we got a buoy ball on our anchor for, and we'll go get him, kind of thing. But that's pretty much a kingfish rig. I'm going to send this around kind of deal with that and that spinning rod. Those are the two different ways that you can pretty much kingfish. There's another thing that too, if you're doing on the hook, what we call sitting on the hook kind of deal, sitting on anchor, and you're fishing bigger baits, there's a technique that we all call ballooning kind of deal, you know, where you've got a big balloon kind of deal. You're going to tie that balloon, you know, 15, 20 feet off the end of your hook, and you're just going to let that bait play out. The wind's going to blow the balloon, the bait's going to swim away from the boat, all that. What that basically does is it lets you get baits further away from the boat, like as if you were trolling with outriggers or stuff like that, but by sitting on the anchor. That balloon is basically acting just as a cork. In the inshore world, you see a cork or a float, you know, a bobber or whatever you want to call it, that's the same thing. You want that balloon far enough away so that the fish never sees it kind of deal. And you're, you know, especially when you're doing that and you're using like, you know, big blue runners or mullet or stuff like that, he's out there and he's just trying to swim down to the bottom kind of thing. You're in 40 feet of water kind of deal kingfish, and that bait's just the whole time. He's head down and he's just trying to dig. Kingfish is going to find him. He hears that vibration. He feels it through their lateral line. All fish have a lateral line. And he's gonna seek that fish out. Most of the time when they hit it, when they start running, the balloon breaks. The only bad thing about it is we don't really like leaving the balloons out there. But in my kingfish bag, and these are pretty much tournament level kingfish bags. You can buy them. You know, West Marine sells them. What it basically is inside of it, it has a bunch of little Ziploc bags, and they have all of your rigs inside of them. And if you look at mine are all labeled for what I want to use them for. Hey, that's a whitebait one kind of deal. As I go back, I've probably got some other double kind of deal. That means there's 2 stinger rigs. There's 2 actual stingers trail off the main hook. Now I just by seeing that, I know I'm getting into like mullet. I'm getting into ladyfish. I'm getting into a bait that's 20 inches long, and I need to put a couple hooks down his back kind of thing. I'll pass this around too, and then in the back I keep all my balloons. Just regular old party balloons that you use at the store. You buy them at Walmart in pretty big bags, and I'll balloon them out. You know, I take it, and you don't have to put much. You're just trying to float that bait. You're just making a float. If I had a big thread fin on, you know, and I was going to balloon a bait, you're tying it off, and now I'm going to tie that to the end of my line, you know, 10, 15 feet up my line kind of deal. That's how you balloon baits for kingfish. Once again, staying on the hook. I'm trying to stay away from that hardcore trolling stuff, we might be trolling for 4 hours for one knockdown of a 40-pound fish. I'm trying to keep this more of what you guys can do in bay boats and small flats boats, and some of these boats. If you think about the way our wind mostly blows this time of year with an east wind, I've sat 8 miles offshore in my Maverick kingfishing, you know, in an 18-foot Maverick because it's flat calm. You know, this time of year we get out there. From now until the time I leave for Boca Grande is usually when our kingfish are here, which is usually about the second week of May. We've got kingfish out there. You don't need a big boat. You don't need these, you know, triple engine 40-foot center consoles to get out there and kingfish. It's super easy. Get out, balloon some baits out, free line a couple baits out. You got 2-3 guys on the boat. The more rods you can put in the water without tangling stuff, that kind of starts getting to the issue. You start having, I get 4 guys that want to go kingfishing, and you're like, that's starting to get a lot, because now instead of snook fishing where I got one guy on the bow and I got one guy here and we're kind of spread out, we're all standing in the back of my boat kind of deal, and we're free lining boats out, baits out behind us kind of deal. But put as many rods out there as you can until you start tangling, and then, all right, well, we got probably 6 might be too many, 4 might just be all you can get away with. And that starts coming with your experienced fishermen. You get 4 guys that know what they're doing, and we see, I'm out of your way, I'm cool, and especially with a kingfish, when he bites it and he takes 100 yards of line, you need to reel in and get out of my way so my fish can go. And you get guys like that, yeah, you can fish 5-6 rods out the back of a boat. But the balloon doesn't need to be much bigger than that. That'll float even a pretty big blue runner. But that's ballooning. And just for demonstration purposes kind of deal, all you're doing is anywhere in your line, say like I said, all you're doing is just tying another granny knot kind of deal. Stick it through, tie it, it doesn't matter where, your balloon rig's on there kind of deal. So you're sitting on the hook, you're going to fish an area kind of thing, you hook your bait up, you drop them in, and just kind of just let them go kind of deal. Let him swim. He'll swim. I just keep playing line out. Keep playing line out. Keep playing line out. And he'll go as far away from you want. I mean, ballooning baits, what I usually do with those is I have 2 rod holders in my tower that are rocket launchers, and I'll stick those up there kind of deal. Balloon, if I can balloon with the wind right, 2 baits as far out as I can get them. Now we can sit here with our snook rods and we can do that. And I know, because these are going to typically be my bigger baits kind of deal, one of those rods goes off, it's game on. That's a big boy kind of deal. We're not playing little stuff. I put my bait clicker on. I set my drag, kind of light so that he can take it, and you're just hearing that. I mean, it's just nonstop, kind of deal. When he takes it, all you're doing is smoothly laying into him with drag pressure, and then just lifting the rod up. Just let him load the rod, let him come tight on it, and he's going to do the rest of the work. If you ever look at kingfish rods, same type rods that we use in Boca Grande to be able to detect the bite. They're very, very fast tip rods. For one, kingfish is like a trout. He's got a very soft mouth. If you're trout fishing and you're using these meat sticks kind of deal, and you're throwing jigs and you're on him and you'll rip it. I mean, if you guys trout fish, you see it ripping a hole in his mouth and all that. Kingfish is the same thing. You pull on him too hard, you'll pull the hook right out of the side of his mouth. He might have stingers in him and everything else, but a mackerel, a kingfish, they're all the same species kind of deal. Their skin's very soft. It's you'll pull right out of it. So you want to obviously fight him, but you don't want to try to horse him. It's a game of whenever he wants to give up and start coming in, then you'll start being able to gather line and give line on him.
Now, how much line do you put under that balloon?
And that, like I said, anywhere between, I usually try to keep it at least 10 foot away from my bait. Okay. Kind of deal. I'll keep it 10 foot. Usually what I'll do is I'll let my bait kind of get out there and I'll let him swim away for a second. And as he's got, 10 foot or so, which for me is usually about where my main line and my leader's connected, and I'll usually tie the knot right in there. You're not doing anything to hurt your knot strength because nothing is tied to the balloon. And you'll even see that the balloon will slide if it needs to. The balloon will slide up and down your line as it needs to. And typically when a kingfish grabs it and he takes a 100-yard run on it and he's sliding across the water sideways and you see your line going crazy, he's going to typically pop it anyways. So
I met a guy at the Outdoor Expo that has now a little device that instead of tying it, you can put it on the device and then that little thing hooks onto your line. It allows the balloon to go away and that thing will sit there and it doesn't affect the line at all. Where I know I've been shark fishing with balloons, and because of that balloon getting caught up in the tip of that rod, and it sit there and it'll cause 80-pound power probe breaking. That's the only thing that sucks about that. But still, with that type of fishing, that's the only chances you got to make.
Yeah, like I said, I'll pass this around. You guys can kind of look at these, see how those are rigged.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned tying an overhand.
Yeah, just
tying an overhand with the balloon.
On the balloon, because all you're doing is trying to make the balloon stick to the line. It needs no structural integrity. It doesn't need anything. The balloon's there strictly as a float. So it's not like you're tying a hook on and we're worried about the balloon. If the balloon comes off, that's great. That's even better for me because now I've got less drag pressure and resistance going through the water with the balloon on there. You're just an overhand knot, kind of deal. Yes, sir.
What do you use it for your knot? Is that a blood knot or is it All break?
Yeah, all of my knots, and I do this on everything that I fish. All of my braid is connected to my fluorocarbon with a uni-to-uni knot kind of deal. That's there's a bunch, you can blood knot stuff, you can surgeons loop it, all that kind of deal. All of my knots are a uni-to-uni knot. You can tie them super fast. I might tie 40, 50 knots in the course of a day. It's got, if you look at any of the tests that they've done over the years on knot strengths kind of deal, uni-to-uni knots retaining almost 90% of its integrity kind of deal once you tie it into a knot. But yeah, all my uni-to-uni stuff is how I connect my braid to my fluorocarbon on any style fishing, tarpon fishing, snook fishing, anything. And my hooks are usually tied on with a loop knot kind of deal. Tarpon fishing, I do snell them. I snell my hooks onto my tarpon fishing rigs, but that's just because of the size, the type of hook we use and all that. When we were talking earlier about buoys kind of deal, this is one of the buoys that I have on my boat. This usually has a little piece of line that goes through it, a little 6-inch piece of line, and it's got a carabiner on the end of it. Basically, this sits on my deck. If I'm tarpon fishing the skyway, or if I'm tarpon fishing the beach and I'm sitting on the anchor, anytime I'm sitting on the anchor and I'm potentially going to have a fish on that I might have to go get, which is pretty much just kingfishing and tarpon fishing. The end of my anchor line, and you can do this just by tying just an overhand knot just to create a loop kind of thing. This has got a little piece of line on it with a carabiner on it. The end of my anchor has a loop on it. I tie the two, I clip that to the end of my anchor line, and if I need to go kind of deal, I take all my anchor line off my cleat and I launch it all off the side of the boat kind of thing, and I'm out. If I'm at the skyway and we got a tarpon on, I'm backing down out of the bridge. We got to go. I want to get that fish away from the bridge and let's go. Same thing kingfishing wise. We're snook fishing on a snook, or we're kingfishing on a snook rod. Anytime you're putting braid on a spinning reel, you need to back it with mono. A lot of people, that's kind of one of the things they wonder, so why does my line slip on my spinning reel and the spool and all that? You need to put about 50 yards of monofilament underneath your braid kind of deal for the braid to be able to bite into and all that. And for one, you take like a 4000 series reel, you can buy like the 150 yard spools of Power Pro, and with a little bit of braid or a little bit of mono underneath there, you can get your distance off the top of your spool to fill them. Because some of these reels, a 4000 series reel, it'll hold almost 300 yards of braid. You just don't need that much braid when you're snook fishing. You might want 150 for doing some of this kingfish or mackerel stuff, but other than that, there's no reason to buy $60 worth of braid to snook fish with. So back it with mono underneath. I usually use on all of my inshore stuff, I usually use like a 12 or a 15 pound solar line, mono line. And basically that tells me as a guide, when I see that line coming up on that spool and I start seeing my braids going and now I'm seeing that mono underneath it, we need to do something kind of deal. Because we're about to get spooled, and that happens quite a bit kingfishing wise, especially when we start playing with real big kingfish on these rods. I've caught kingfish on my snook rods up to about 30 pounds, and it's probably one of the coolest things you can do because you're not horsing that fish, you're truly fighting the fish. And when I do that, when I see that braid, that's when I'm about to come off my anchor. I'm typically going to have already came off my anchor if I know we've got a fish that we haven't been able to slow down yet. A kingfish is kind of like a snook. He's going to make a long run, you pick the yardage kind of deal, and at some point he's going to stop. And he's going to change directions, or he's going to come back at you, or he's going to do something like that. When he stops, that's typically the time to start getting that line back. And even big kingfish sitting on the anchor, 20-pound kingfish on a snook rod, you're really never going to have to come off your buoy. But sometimes